Good afternoon over there, Korea. Over here in the Netherlands, it's still very early in the morning. But I'm very pleased to meet you all online. So my name is Paul Janssen. I'm a product director of OCKTO, as said, as was introduced. And I will give you now a presentation that lasts about 40 minutes around OCKTO, what we do, who we are, and how we came to be who we are, and how we go further to the future. So please note any questions you have. At the end, there will be a Q&A from around 10 minutes, and I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have. So let me start with sharing my screen so we can start the presentation. So hopefully you do now see my screen. If not, the moderator will surely let me know, and I will then start this presentation. So what will we do in the presentation? We will, well, as I said, it will last around 40 minutes. I will talk about OCKTO. I will give you a demo. It's not a live demo. I recorded it, and then we go into the ready for the future part and end with a Q&A. So let me start and talk a bit about OCKTO, what it is. We now already are in our 6th year, already scaling up the organization. Now we work with, well, almost already more than 40 employees, and we have plus 40 customers all in the Netherlands. In the end of the presentation, or halfway, I will give you an insight in who those customers then are. But we are a scale-up, and we are growing rapidly. We do now around 10,000 transactions each week, which means that already in 2022 there will be more than 500,000 Dutch people, working with OCKTO. And also in the past years, already a couple of million people already used OCKTO. So it's not small anymore, and we're getting more and more important in this industry. So what is our positioning? We are the platform for personal data sharing. We're now in the Netherlands. We'd like to grow into Europe, but in the Netherlands, we're now known as the platform for personal data sharing. And we actually have 3 key things that we always take into account. One is that, of course, we want to be secure, not only in a technical way, but also, of course, in the GDPR, the regulation around data privacy. Those 2 things are key in everything that we do. The trusted part is more about, let's say, that the data using service can really not only trust that we are secure, but especially can trust the data that they receive. So the data that we collect or let the user collect and share is always data they can trust, so they can automate their acceptance processes, can use that data instead of using, manual forms or any other things that individuals in let's say in the old world, between quotes, gives you. And then simple is, especially from a user perspective, it should be very, very easy to use the platform for the consumer. But also simple means that also for a data consuming service, it should be relatively simple to retrieve the data, to connect to the platform, and to use the data that then individuals can share. Now, importantly is then what can a data using service then collect via OCKTO, and what can consumers collect for them. Now, what we want to be is that for any use case, for onboarding a new customer, or also for lifecycle management, the consumer should only use OCKTO to deliver all data that he needs for this service. So we then divide all our features into these 5 pillars. One is everything around identification and authentication. I will come back to that a little bit. We call this OCKTO ID. We have a quite broad range of public data sources. So these are the data sources that that our government gives us as citizens of the Netherlands, and that we can go into, log into with our digital identity that's given by the government. The other one is private data sources. most known is the bank transactions. The PSD2 is quite big in Europe, getting bigger. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but that is the regulation in Europe that forces banks to enable parties like OCKTO to help consumers get all the bank transactions out of the banking systems and be able to share that data with other parties. The fourth one is the pillar is the personal data sources. That's something to still build on. I'll come back to that in a couple of slides, but we will build on in the rest of 2022. And then ending also with a little bit what's a bit more in the future, that we also want to be able to sign contracts, or maybe even sign let's say payments, payment forms and that kind of stuff, so that in the end, as a consumer, you only need OCKTO to share all data, but also be able to sign off any contract that is at the end of that. Well, mostly then it's the last touch point in getting to be a consumer, a client for any of our clients. Now, public data sources, the ones that we currently serve is, well, we have quite big websites. By the way, it's all websites. So on the government side in the Netherlands, still all over Europe, by the way, there are no APIs yet delivered by the government. So that forces us actually to have a solution where we let the user log in and then scrape the data from a website. After that, minimize the data to the data that is needed for the consuming service. But yeah, well, it's not a perfect world there yet. So we will get there. Something happening here. We will get there in the end because new European regulation is coming up, and that in the coming 5 to 10 years, all governments in the Europe are forced to also, like banks, make it possible to share the data through solid solutions that also cover GDPR regulations and that kind of stuff. We also, as citizens in the Netherlands, have a tax authority, of course, like everybody else in the world, but we are also able to download data from there, which is quite wealthy data. So that's the next data source. We also have an employment authority where not only people that are unemployed can find their, the wages that they get from the government, but also any employee in the Netherlands can find their lots of data, around 5 years of data around his employment. The pension authority, in the Netherlands, you get something from the state, but also for every employment that you had, there will be a pension fund there for that employment. So there's one other source where you can find all the data around pensions for yourself. And then the last one is what we call Duo. That's how we call it in the Netherlands. That's an environment where you can find student debt, student loans. So as a student in the Netherlands, you can get a loan from the government, which you have to pay back in about 40 years. And in this environment, you can see the current state of the possible loan that you would have there, and all that information, of course, is around loans is obviously used by parties in the Netherlands that they will give you a new loan or mortgage, and they of course need to know how your current state is on income and debts. The private data sources, we do something like a name check, especially for when we do bank transactions. The Dutch Netherlands Bank, they say, well, you can do this, you can connect to the PSD2 world, but if you want to have a license to do that, you also need to make sure that every customer that you're on board that goes through your system is covered with a proper CDD check. And one of the checks is the money laundering law claims. Is that you check if the person is actually a publicly exposed person, or somebody who is on a list to be known as a possible terrorist. So those two So sanctioned people and publicly exposed people are not allowed on our platform at the moment. Well, sanctioned people will never be. Publicly exposed people will be, but not for getting bank transactions, but for name checks and that kind of checks, we will allow also publicly exposed people to be on our platform. The other private source is banks. Obviously, we now connect to all Dutch banks, but this is European law, so we will be able, with our PSD2 license, also to connect to any other bank throughout Europe. Unfortunately, in Europe, there was a lot of regulation, but what they did not regulate is the way those banks design their APIs. So every bank has its own solution, and in the end, but you can connect to it, and every connection to every bank is potentially different from the other bank. So there are now already, of course, companies in between that make sure that they know all the API. That they know all those APIs. So for us as OCKTO, it's then easier to connect to the world of banks by using one of those providers, which we obviously also do in the Netherlands. One other private data source is, it's a declaration also. It's not really the tax authority, but there are declarations around income that we also can use and that you can upload as a user. Now, something what we now adding towards the platform is what we discovered new already a little bit, of course, is that we have a lot of data, but it's lots of time just not enough. It's about 90%, 80%, sometimes up to 100, but a lot of times, especially at the end of the process, the data consuming service needs a little bit more info. For instance, in the Netherlands, it's important when you sign a contract with a bank, the bank needs to know if you are originally an American citizen. Something simple, but not something that you find on any data source that we have in the Netherlands. So for that reason, and for little other declarations that you need to make as a client, we will now bring also forms into the OCKTO platform. Those forms are pre-designed, and as a data consuming service, you can ask to fill in a certain form, and OCKTO will then present that form to the user. You can fill it out, and then he can save it as a signed PDF that he then can share through the platform. But also other documents, like a document that you, for instance, imagine you are somebody who is divorced, and then in some services, it's important to know that if you are divorced, maybe you pay an alimony to your ex-partner, or maybe you receive an alimony from your ex-partner. That then you need to prove that. You can prove it a little bit via bank transactions, but that's still, let's say, not too mature yet that our data consuming services accept that as to be the truth. Therefore, you need then to give all your, I don't know exactly the word in English, the document that describes all the arrangements around your divorce. Well, that contract can then be uploaded, or you can, make a photocopy of it. And also then via a signed PDF, it will be shared with the data consuming party. That's around what we will do in the rest of 2022. I think that will be ready at the end of December, maybe early January. But what we come with next month, or in about a week, we will introduce OCKTO ID. And OCKTO ID is really a very, very simple way to identify yourself online without the use of a passport or any identification document. The only thing you need to do is to sign in to two websites. One is the government websites, where you really find the data as you are known by the government. And the other data source is a private data source. That's what we call Bank ID in the Netherlands. So you can log also into your Bank ID. And together they are really a very, very strong identity by combining the two, matching them. That not only gives you a strong identification, but also a very broad set of data that you then can use to as a data consuming service to, for instance, do your KYC program, which will be different from one company to the other, right? So if you have a KYC program at a bank, will be a bit broader than if you do the onboard yourself as a customer for any other kind of company in the Netherlands. Now, it is a very simple way of identifying yourself. No need for scanning a passport, making a photocopy, selfies, all that kind of stuff. It's just 2 simple logins, which makes us compliant to European AML regulation and Sanction Act accordingly. It's very well on the GDPR part. So the data minimization, you only need to share the data part. You do not have to share your social security number. You don't need to share your photo or your writing. So it's only the data that's needed. And the good thing on the other side also from the data consuming party is that everything is digitalized. So you can really digitalize this part of a very important part, of course, of the customer onboarding is the identification, and you can fully digitalize it and do not have to rely on copies of passports that lots of times are just not good enough. So a very quick, simple way for getting reliable data. And of course, as Octo, we expect a lot from this feature, and we think not only it will be simple for consumers and the data consuming parties, all the customers that we already have, but we also think that with this feature we can enter new markets, simple markets where people meet each other, like consumers meet each other, or where very quick transactions are made between individuals and parties, but where trust around who the other one is really essential. Now, going into the demo here, so let me explain a little bit how Octo works. To be able to receive data via the Octo platform, you need to be licensed. So any provider, what we call it provider data consuming service, any provider will have a license. He will pay an annual fee, and on top of that, he will pay a fee per transaction. And then how does it work? The institution will start up an Octo session that is represented as a QR code or a link, and that QR code will then be scanned by the user with his phone. The phone will, via deep linking, see, hey, Octo is already on the phone, or it's not on the phone yet. So he will guide the user to install Octo, and then as soon as Octo started, it will know what the data consuming service wanted. That was already in let's say the information was given when he started up Octo. So the phone knows to go through the data sources that are requested. User will log into those data sources. Data will be either via APIs or scraped and then shown to the user. He can browse through that data and then give his consent, and then the data will be sent to the requester. So let me go into the demo. So imagine you are invited. This is in perfect Dutch. This is the demo company that did an invite to you, and you clicked on some website, or it's an email. Doesn't really matter. There's some link towards Octo, and so what it will do, it will ask you to open the app or install it, right? Because he now sees that you do not have the app yet. It will guide you to the store. You will install Octo, open Octo, and via the deep linking mechanism, Octo already knows what to do. In this case, it will guide you through 3 things. It will guide you through the MyGov environment, to the salary environment, where you find everything about your employment. And then also it will go through the Octo ID part, letting you log in once more to get your ID. And then how does it work? You just simply click you will go to the government login, which it's not something in our control, of course. You will just log in, and then it will start scraping the data, getting the data into the phone, logging out of that website again, and simply you will go to the next site. And then the exact same thing happens again. You log in to that specific data source, and the scraping from that data source will happen again until it's finished. Now all data is available, and now you need to do the last part over here, is identify with your bank ID. And that is, you just select the bank of your, that you use. You will go into the bank app that's normally on your phone, or you will go to the website of the bank. And also here, it's very simple. You log in, and it's done. So now also I demonstrated OCKTO ID, which will be introduced next week, simply by logging into the MyGov environment, and after that logging into the bank. Of course, with some algorithms, we can combine the two and make sure that your identity is set. Now, not in this demo, but what normally is now here is all the data that has been shared will now be shown to you. You can browse through it. You can go into all the details and see if you actually want to share this data. And if you want to share the data, you just click this opt-in and send the data. The data now will be, sent to the OCKTO platform. It will be, we make a nice JSON overview from it, and we will send it to the endpoint that was pre-configured by the data consuming service. So that we also know everything with SSL connections, of course, and that kind of stuff. So it's also secure. Now, what's now happened with that data, can be two things. It's either just given to the data consuming service and that's done, but also could be an ongoing consent. So it could also be that you as an individual say, well, save this data for a process that I'm in now for 90 days or whatever. So that also another data consuming service that's connected to the OCKTO platform can use parts of that data somewhere else in the chain that I'm in. As an example, let's say the mortgage broker asks you for your data so they can give you a proper advice and also offer you, get some offers in from banks for you. Now, and let's say that is the demo company. What then could be is that the consumer already, sends the data to the demo company. Demo company does all kinds of things for you. And then he asks ING and ABN AMRO and Rabobank for an offer to give for a mortgage. Now, what they all three can do is they can just go into that data wallet of this user and request additional data. Because they are connected to the platform, they can, and it will pop up as a notification into your phone, like, hey, ING used this data for your offer, or ABN AMRO did. And as long as you think you're happy with them using that data for that process, you will just get those notifications in. But you also can stop that consent at any time, so they can not use that data anymore. And also automatically, of course, it will be destroyed after some time. When the consent is too old. So with that solution, you as a consumer only need to onboard yourself once at the broker, and the broker and allow the broker to share that data. So any other party in the chain can use that data. So you are serviced by those parties before, without you having to share like your identification or other materials in multiple times, and having to send your data all over the world with emails and other stuff. So that is the demo I want to give. Well, in the Netherlands, we already are quite regulated. When you want to be a service as OCKTO, a provider of data in the financial markets, you already need to be, you are supervised by the Dutch authority, the financial authority. And because we also have a PSD2 license, we also are supervised by the Dutch Netherlands Bank. So having said that, this is quite something in the Netherlands. If you are under control by the Dutch Netherlands banks, that also means that your organization, needs to be compliant to all the rules, of course, and make all the reports in time and all that kind of stuff. So that is for a small company, as OCKTO was a couple of years ago. Well, still not too big, but we were only, let's say, a couple of 10 people in the beginning. Quite something to grow from being a startup, going into that market, and then having suddenly have to deal with institutions like the Netherlands Bank was quite something for us. So we really need to grow up quickly. We already were. I now, for the 5th year in a row, are now ISO had an ISO 27001 certificate. Of course, because we think security comes first, but also because our customers demand us to be so. It really helped us also to get more mature in the world of security and regulation, but also and as a result, our platform became a lot better because of our certification. And still we are growing each year, getting better and better in the way we process everything that's going on within the organization, actually. And then now for the 3rd year in a row, we also are officially a My Data operator. Also, that means that we, coming a bit to the second part of my presentation is, if you start an organization like OCKTO, you have, you just start and you want to create a solution and make it sustainable. And then My Data operator came up, and that really helped us to also more define who we wanted to be, and also defined the way we think about sharing data and the role we play. And that also helped me to design the platform in a better way. Well, this is a list of, it's not fully complete, about the financial institutions that now work in the Netherlands with OCKTO. And I don't know how familiar you are with the European market, of course, but all, let's say, big names are there. Everybody actually works now with OCKTO. So I think it's more closer to 50 banks now than the 40 that were in the first slide. But actually means that ING, ABN AMRO, Rabo, but also lots of insurance companies. This is more like a big pension fund. The biggest mortgage brokers in the Netherlands, they all work with OCKTO. So now we do this 500,000 transactions now, and mostly that's done in the with financial institutions. We also do other markets, but outside of let's say the banking and mortgage world, like private lease and consumer finance. But also we do a business with local governments for, let's say, specific use cases that have nothing to do with finance. So it's growing more and more. We're getting more and more known, and instead of going to the outside world, telling what OCKTO is, what data sharing is, data sharing itself becomes more and more popular. So people find us now more from themselves than that we have to search for them. But still, this is, let's say, the second section of the presentation. As OCKTO, we started in 2016 or 2015, even with the idea, of course, and then but we had some idea, and that idea is not 100% the same idea as we have it today. You get more and more familiar with that market of data sharing, and you need to adapt, of course. So we looked at what we think, a little bit, to the future. What would now be very typical use cases for any individual in the Netherlands? What would you find normal in around, let's say, between 5 and 10 years from now? And one of them would be what I think you would feel. Everybody, and I think also in this audience, will create accounts. Maybe tens or maybe even more accounts every every year on the internet. And then, if you create an account, you always have to do the same things, right? You have to write down your name, your address, some nickname, passwords, all that kind of stuff, and then there's an account created. And that's not too complicated, right? People do it all the time. But we think it would help if you just by having a QR code there on a website, scanning the website, then the OCKTO app already knows which data that website needs for creating that account, and just share it, and the account is created instantly. That will give a couple of opportunities. One is the data consuming service, this website, then can trust the data that is given. He knows the email is correct, he knows the name is correct, and the address, which is quite important in lots of cases. You as a consumer also know you didn't make any typos. But also, what also could be, and that is maybe even for the future, is that those attributes are not even shared anymore with that data consuming service. That is just, there will be an account created without any name, without any address. And as soon as that address is needed, it will be asked for via this contract that's now here. So this will be, I think, very important going forward, is that we will try to create services that not give data, but give access to data instead of the data itself. Buying on credit, of course, already there, but getting. I think if you stand in the line at a market and you buy a big television for more than €1,000, not everybody can buy that instantly. Want to buy it on credit? You can go the American way with credit cards, but you also can do it in another way, so that you instead of paying with your credit card, you would pay with something like an OCKTO account, where you instantly could see if the person is able to pay back the credit, let's say, and you can create an account while you're buying it, instead of filling in all kinds of contracts. Just by a little click, they can do a check on your income, on your assets, and see if you're good for your money, and give you the contract instantly when you want to buy when you want to buy something. So this instant credit, not only on credit score, but on actual trusted data, that is, I think, a market that we step into. This would be another solution. Like we in the Netherlands, we all have to get at home. We have an energy portal for in any home, where you can digitally see what your spendings are on energy. Another solution, for instance, could be that we have a connection to that portal, of you as a consumer, of course, have a connection to that portal, and can use that information to sign contracts that are, for instance, for the solution would be the green mortgage. So imagine there is a interest benefit if you are a green person, so you do not spend too much on electricity. You get 0.5% shortage on your mortgage, but then you only have to prove that you are still a green person, right? That you do not spend too much energy. So you easily could also make a connection to that energy host and send that data every once in a while to the money provider, so that he can still check, that does this person still is a green person, and therefore get this shortage on the interest. And of course, this could then be a contract, ongoing contract that you can stop at any moment as an individual, but also each year can renew. And this one is, of course, very, very, very close by, is that instead of sharing data again, you just can use your own data wallet, the information that's in your OCKTO account, to prove things. And a very simple thing then could be, when you buy some wine at the liquor store and people don't trust your rating, you can just prove it by, they do a request via a QR code, and you can then, just tell them, yes, I'm 18, and the proof itself would then be enough to make you buy that bottle of wine. So this is actually all claims-based thing. I think that is really where we're going forward to. But it needs a lot of time to let the consumer, the data consuming party really accept that they don't need data, but they only need answers. So there's really, I think, from now to 2040, we will step by step get into getting used to using less and less data, but using claims. And those claims, of course, creating a claim like something simple, are you older than 18? The claim, saying it is, of course, very easy, but really claiming it and proving it is not easy at all. So you need, we need to do quite something before the data consuming party really can trust that, and also then get them in the state that they're actually going to use these kinds of solutions. So we're going to start next year with these claims things and start, working with our providers to think about solutions like this. What do we have to do for them to trust the data in that way that they don't need the data anymore, but only the answers? That's, I think, very interesting going forward. Well, now, when we started in 2016, of course, we were not as mature as we are today. And hopefully in 10 years, we are much more mature than we are today. So when we started in 2016, we started very pragmatically. We thought around, our thought was, hey, we were in this IT industry already for long. And we did created a lot of digital environments for banks and insurance companies. And consumers then had to, create an account, put in some data, and then they got some answers. And then most of the time, we ended up with sliders like, what is your income, what is your pension, and the kind of systems. Because people, if you would ask them, what is your salary, or what is your income, or what is your pension income in the future, they just don't know, right? They don't know exactly what is meant with terms like salary. Is it my net salary? Is it my gross salary? Is it after? So is it after the pension contribution or before, or all these kind of things? So we thought, well, if we would automate this, getting the data in an easier manner, that would help consumers, and we're sure the financial institutions will want to pay for it. So that was really in a very pragmatic way of thinking for us to start this service. And after we built it, very rapidly, we were very successful actually with this very pragmatic approach. And but at the same time, also, before 2016, of course, there were a lot of programs where a lot of people came together in the government world, but also in the private world, where they thought about data sharing, and they came up with a very rich architectures in how you should do this. If you looked at it purely from a GDPR and a security environment, but we already started here being successful. Touched upon these architectures that were brilliant, but a bit far from reality in our minds. So what we did since then is talked a lot with architects, with world of data sharing, and in these talks we also came into the organization maidata.org, and we came in contact with them, and they also, in my mind, were not completely on the right side of this slide. They were also a bit more pragmatic and realistic in, hey, it is not a perfect world out there. We need to bring everybody together to get it in a way that individuals can trust the ecosystems that they are in, that's easy to use for them, that they know what they are doing, and that they are protected, of course. But on the other side, the things that are created in those ecosystems should be sustainable, and they only can be sustainable if the money is there as well. So if you as an organization do not earn money, you are not sustainable, right? So if you are an individual using a data service that is not sustainable, where will your data be when the company is not there anymore? So we need to work in ecosystems that can be trusted, but there was nothing, right? So we needed to come together, from the pragmatic OCKTOs, like they are there in the world, and the perfect plans that architectures wrote. So I think in the end we will meet halfway somewhere, right? We are already going forward with our architecture. I'll show you a couple of slides. So this was more or less the way how OCKTO was when we started. There was an OCKTO service where, and the provider that was authenticated to do a request. Then the user, installed the app, got the data from the data sources, and then shared that data, right? And as I told you, he could also do that via, multiple times in one chain. Now, this was very much the approach how we did it, and then we, after talking with the MyData org and all kinds of other visions that we had on where we go with the platform. The biggest problem that we actually had that there were no APIs. Still, there are no APIs, and that is really, in the perfect world of data sharing, what you want is, of course, there is a token access that gives you access to data, and you want with that token give others access to that same data, right? So you want to have access to data yourself, given to you in a digital way, an API normally. And then from that access, you want to give others access to that same data. So, but because everything is to be scraped in the Netherlands, there is no way of giving a token to a user as a data source. So there's no real data issuing there. So what the first thing that we now did is that we said, well, let us be for now the data issuer. So if a consumer collects his data via scraping, the first thing that we will do is we will do as if we are an issuer, if we are the data source ourselves, and issue the data in a perfect manner. And then from there, we can give a token to the user to consume that data, and he can send out another token, a consent to the data consuming service to have access to that data via that token. So we can issue that data over here as long as it's needed and give access. So that's what we did first. And then what we are creating as we speak is the OCKTO account. So what we now will do is that instead of just going through OCKTO, as I just showed you in the demo, maybe you noticed that there was no quick account created. It was just a single transaction, and then that was that. What we now will do is we will also put an account in between. So after you collected your data and you would go into OCKTO again, that data is still there for you within your account. And you can do multiple things then with the data that you already collected. Also, the consents that are currently, more or less in the app, we will give that a specific position in the platform. So the account, the consent on the issued data is all in harmony with each other, and we can send out keys from your account to data consuming services. And they can then connect via consent. They can then connect the OCKTO service with that key that is given and get the data that belongs to that token, to that consent. Now, going more further down the road, we also want to separate everything that we do with the data from the sharing of the data. So currently, when we a simple example is some of our data consuming services that they don't want the data in the format that we normally give it, but they want to have it in another format so they can import it directly into their financial systems. Now, we created a couple of those export files. That would be typically something that should not be should be on the merchant side, so something extra that we can do with data. So it's easier to use the data, but it's not the essential thing that OCKTO does. The essential thing is making individuals, giving them the possibility to get data and share data. It's not the essential thing to create it in specific outputs. So these are the things that we will then separate from the platform, and then ultimately also there's a lot of talk about blockchains where consents in the end could be stored, and where so that also the interoperability between OCKTO and competitors of OCKTO, that you as an individual can swap from one to the other if you wanted to, but then you should not have a lock-in right on OCKTO. So we need to open up our register towards a generic register that might be out there in Europe or in the Netherlands, where then the consent is stored. And ultimately also that the OCKTO issued data is no longer there, but the issued data is actually issued by the data source itself. So then in that register, the issued data will be there, or at least the token to that issued data. The consents will be there, and OCKTO will connect to that external register. So this is, more or less what I had to tell you. Maybe a little bit more to where we will be in around 5 years. I think there will be two things happening. OCKTO will become more mature. We will grow maybe to 75 employees, and especially we will grow because we will go reach out to other countries in Europe. That will happen, I think, from 2023 on. We will start the first next country, let's say. We are getting ready to scale up also the organization. So the product is now ready for scaling up, but as an organization also you need to be ready, right? To go into the next country is not something small. We are building on it, expecting 2023 to go to the first other country, but we will limit ourselves to Europe. So I think Europe is big enough to grow, and also the regulation in Europe is very, also growing with us. So we want to be ready for Europe and let's say conquer Europe one country by the other. So we expect one country in 2023, but in 2025 already to be there in let's say 3 to 5 countries, depending a little bit on the success in each of those countries. But normally it would take per country around 2 years to set up a business that is used. We expect, and then another 5 years to get it really on the level that we are now in the Netherlands. And what we will do is we will set up satellites in each country, get all the IT and everything in the Netherlands, but all the business we'll set it up per country and grow from there. So platform is ready. The organization is about ready, and we expect a lot from it. So this is what I wanted to share with you. Thank you for listening to me, and I think we are now ready for the Q&A part.
Yes, thank you very much. We do have quite a bit of questions, and let me ask the first question. So I wonder how the MyData service differentiation is taking place. Can you please tell us the characteristics of the service MyData services of your competitors?
Yeah, so we don't know any competitors, of course. There's only OCKTO. No, of course not. And there is. You see that in the Netherlands, characteristics are all our competitors that we really find in the world that we are in also have similar solutions, right? They have to do web scraping to be successful. But what we already see also, there are competitors now that have very pure solutions that only work with maybe more or less what our end goal is, that kind of architecture. And what we see is that those competitors are doing a lot of proof of concepts, with our the clients that we already have. Also do these proof of concepts with them. So what we see is that we see them as competitors because they're not competing with us financially, but they are competing with us on an architectural level, right? So they are forcing us also to go into that more ideal world, which is very good. And I honestly mean it. But at the same time, we know web scraping is still out there, and will be there for at least another 5 years. But I expect even 10 years because governments are just not going very fast in getting into that API world. What we also see, there's many PSD2 solutions. Initially, after this PSD2 regulation, there was tens of PSD2 solutions out there, but what I now also see that they dropped back, and lots of them are stopping because it's hard to make money in the PSD2 world. It's not sharing that data. It's not too complicated, and also using the data, that is the complicated part. And there are no real good solutions that get that data out and do proper algorithms on them. So what we see is that the sharing is popular to PSD2, but using is still manual. So the data consuming services are still using all that data to use their old processes. It's just an easier way of getting the data in. So it's hard to at this moment it's hard to do something with PSD2. But we see within OCKTO, it's growing very rapidly, the usage of PSD2, but that's because we combine it with that other data. So I think we are the only one that's doing that in the Netherlands at the moment, within one license. But there will be new other ones coming in, I'm sure. What we see throughout Europe is that, especially in the Nordics, like Sweden and Norway and Denmark, and more Nordics, they're very well spread solutions, very well architectured, very easy to use as a consumer. But that's also because they are far ahead of the rest of Europe when it comes to data sharing. We're not even thinking about going into those countries with OCKTO because we will be so far behind to these solutions that are already there. But that's also because the architecture in those countries is very good organized. Elsewhere, we see similar situations as in the Netherlands. I think the government in the Netherlands is a bit ahead of the rest in Europe, but they are getting there. Like France and Spain, getting better and better in sharing, in giving data to their citizens. So we see also competition coming up, especially in France. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it is. Thank you. 네, 고맙습니다. 이어지는 질문.
Yes, we have other questions. Here in Korea is the only country where the country that has adopted API, and this is led by the government. And do you think this API and the government leadership, do you think this is helpful in enhancing Korea's MyData competitiveness?
I would say absolutely. And I hope we will get it in Europe soon, right? In the Netherlands soon, because it's, of course, now this whole scraping part that we do, it's quite complicated, right? It takes a lot of effort also for OCKTO to build it, to maintain it. It's not as stable as an API normally is. And the very important part is that the whole thing around the GDPR, the regulation around privacy, it's all now given to OCKTO, more or less, right? We have to be in control on that data and make sure that our data consuming services do not consume too much data, right? That they account for the data that they are consuming. Of course, they are responsible themselves, but we also need to play that role. Where in an API world, like a government, it himself can define what is a healthy data to deliver, right? What for a specific reason. So if these APIs are well architecture, I would say this complete GDPR part of it can then be governed by the data sharing. So the data service itself, the data source itself, instead of the operator having to be in control there. But the biggest reason is that it will help the Korea's competitiveness is that it's very easy to connect. So everybody can create a solution like OCKTO quite rapidly. And so that will help a lot of little OCKTOs stepping up and bringing those services. And of course, only a few of them will in the end win. But at least there will be a lot of competition and therefore better solutions because, I think competitiveness always brings better things above. One is if you work together on in this new world, new things will be invented. So I really think that it's a very good decision from the Korean government, and only hoping that we will get there in Europe soon.
네, 고맙습니다. 이어지는 질문.
Yes, thank you. Let me ask the next question.
Yeah.
You actually had an interview with our newspaper. So OCKTO processes the data and provides the data to the users in according with their lifetime cycle. So can you give us more explanation what you mean by this?
By the part so what we call the consent, right? So you give your consent to share data that you just collected yourself. You saw it on your phone. This is the data that I will share, and then you give your consent. And that consent could be a one-off consent, so only once you will give that data, and that's that. But also could be that you say, now I want to share this kind of data every 3 months or every year, or I want to share that same data with multiple data consuming services in a row. So then you give multiple consents. But one of these consents, let's say this 3-month consent, what then will happen is that the data consuming service can use that data for about 3 months or whatever period of time. And then but they also can, the data consuming service can say, well, I need fresher data, right? So with scraping, of course, there's no possibility to retrieve newer data if data is renewed by the data source itself. So what then can happen is that the data consuming service says, well, I need your income statement. I need a new variant of it, and he can ask that question because there's still an ongoing consent, and you can then go to that data source again, collect the freshest data around your income statement, for instance, and then automatically share that data again with that data consuming service. So the difference with the original variant of the use case is that there is no new QR code needed, no transaction really started. It's just a notification. You do something, and then automatically the data is shared again. So that's what I meant with an ongoing consent.
네, 고맙습니다. 이어지는 질문 드리겠습니다.
So in the Netherlands, in other European countries, the regulations related to my data. So in what direction are these regulations moving?
Well, I'm not 100% sure where it's in Korea, but I guess it's more or less similar. So what we see in Europe, we want to protect Europe a little bit from the big techs from America, right? Like the Facebooks and the way Google, Facebook, and how they share data and handle privacy. In Europe, not everybody's too fond about it. So what we want to create a better world around data sharing. So, but it's also a bit of a protective way. So we also want to force those big techs also to handle our data of European citizens in a better way. And I think the direction is, in the end, it will be there will be big data pools where anonymized data will be in, so that a lot of tech companies can use that data to create new businesses, to get more data out of the data, right? More knowledge. That's one side of the whole program in Europe. The other side is purely the data sharing itself. Make it in a way that citizens in Europe can trust. If I share data in this manner, the other side can get that data, but nobody else. I am in control. I decide who gets my data, and I know where that data is. And also I'm protected by law that if somebody abuses that data, that consent that I gave them, you can use my data for this and this goal, nothing else. If they use it for something else, that they are, doing something wrong, and you can force them to correct it. So I think everything is around getting you as an individual, in control, and I think that is throughout the world the main goal of the European regulation.
Yes, thank you. We are now going to ask the last question.
Okay.
The insurances and the banking. I mean, you talked mainly about the insurances and banking. Do you have plans to go into other businesses? What sort of businesses are you thinking about getting into? And as OCKTO is trying to expand its services, what are some of the challenges do you expect there to be?
Okay. Yeah. So yes, absolutely, we will go into other business. I can name something very simple. It's like there are a lot of marketplaces out there and dating sites where individuals meet each other. So now we currently always in the individual to a data consuming service, right? To an institution use case. I like to get more into the individual to individual use cases where, for instance, in the marketplace in the Netherlands, you can, for instance, buy a car or whatever through the internet from each other. But the thing is, you don't really know that other person that's on the other side of the internet, right? And we think that with digital identification, it would make it with verified identities. It would make it very easy to see, is that person actually the person that he says he is? So on a dating site, is that other person actually a man? Is he indeed 42 years old? You don't need to know everything of that person, but you can maybe check a couple of little attributes that the other can prove. Yes, I'm a man, and I am 42. So that it's all about trust, I would say. So everywhere where the trust is sometimes jeopardized, I think we as OCKTO can play a role. So that's really the broad way of looking at things from my perspective. So I think financial institutions, of course, we embrace them, and they are very important to us. But I think the other markets, individual to individual markets, but also in retail, everywhere where you need to onboard a client, OCKTO can play an important role and make it easy for individuals to sign up and meet others in a trusted way. So, and then the second question was like, do you foresee then difficulties, right? What do we have to overcome? Of course, there are lots of difficulties. Only getting employees in these days, I think, is maybe even the biggest challenge that we have at the moment is getting employees, right? You can have growth statements in Excel, but getting the good people in, it's really, really very, very hard, and especially in IT, but also getting good salespeople in, getting good support people in, it's very, very hard. And I think that will be our biggest struggle. I think our idea is good. We find the customers. We have good marketing. I think also in other countries, we will get there. It will take some time, but without employees, it will be impossible. So getting employees in and keeping them, that's our biggest challenge.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jansen, for your wonderful presentation and sharing your insight during the Q&A session. And I'm sure your presentation and answers would be very informative and helpful to all the participants. Thank you.